We are people who act from our being. We have a given being that just exists, and it exists before we are doing anything. And it's so interesting because we can see it in other people. We know that we love our friends because of who they are, not because of what they do for us. We love our pets because of their beingness. And yet somehow we get that really mixed up when it comes to ourselves.
Hello, and welcome to the Shifting Culture podcast, in which we have conversations about the culture we create and the impact we can make. We long to see the body of Christ look like Jesus. I'm your host, Joshua Johnson. You know, there's this thing that happens. We get so caught up in the doing, the productivity, the hustle. We define ourselves by what we accomplish, by the checkboxes we could tick off. But what if there's another way? What if we're not just cogs in a machine, but creative beings made in the image of a creative God? In this episode, we dive into that question with author Maria Bowler. She shares how becoming a new mom during the pandemic forced her to confront this head on. When the doing was stripped away, who was she really? The answer, it turns out, lies not in what we produce, but in our very being. Maria invites us to consider a new vision, one where we're not just doers, but makers, where the effort we exert is not about forcing our will, but about deep engagement, where we trust that our heart's desires and the things that break it open are clues to the creative work we're meant to do. So take a deep breath. This conversation just might be the permission slip that you need to let go of the pressure to perform and instead embrace the freedom to create, to make time for the things that truly matter, not just what we can check off the list. The world is waiting for the unique gifts only you can bring. So join us as we figure out how to move from producers to makers. Here is my conversation with Maria Bowler. Maria, welcome to Shifting Culture. Excited to have you on. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me.
I'm really excited to get into the creative side of things and creativity and moving and beyond productivity. Your new book, Making Time, your subtitle, A New Vision for Crafting Life Beyond Productivity. I think that's something we're all yearning for. I had a conversation with a friend yesterday, and he saw your book on my table, and he was like, I need that. I need that. This is exactly what I'm looking for. And so I'd love to get into some of your story to figure out where were you? How did the spark come alive within you to move beyond this doing life that we all get caught up into?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know about you, but I was born in the mid 80s, and I was raised with this idea that, you can do anything. And my social sphere gave me this idea that also meant I should do maybe everything, and maybe everything to a high degree. And I tried my darndest and found a lot of resistance. When I went through college, I had fits and starts, but I really just thought maybe I'm missing discipline. Maybe I'm missing motivation. Maybe I'm just missing some secret routine or secret answer that will somehow get me through this. And then along my journey, I studied to become a spiritual director with some Benedictine nuns, which gave me the opportunity to sit across from people and discuss what was going on in their inner worlds. And I found that they had a lot of similar questions and similar pressures as around their spiritual life. They would say, I just can't, I know I should pray. I just can't quite, why can't I get this prayer routine down? And then when I was an editor working with writers, they had similar questions. I just can't get this writing routine down. And I thought, okay, I'm not alone here. I know that if there was an answer on the level of simply doing the right things, then we would have found it. Now, that isn't to say that there aren't things to do, But we're working so hard to solve these big inner questions from the level of doing it right or enough. And so maybe it's the questions we're asking that are not working. And then it really hit me. It all kind of came as a huge confrontation when I had a baby, as COVID hit. I'd gone through 2 graduate programs. I had hustled as far as I could, and all of a sudden the world shut down, and I had a new baby April 2020. So you can imagine, suddenly, I really couldn't do anything. My baby had colic, so she was, demanding my attention and yet would not be soothed in, your traditional ways. You just had to literally sit with her. I was so thrown back into myself and alone, really. I mean, my husband was working all the time. I was isolated like many of us were. And so that really put me into the corner that I needed to be in to start saying, okay, like if I actually cannot solve this loneliness, this intensity on the level of doing it right or doing enough, then maybe I can trust a different set of questions that ask me who I am being. Who am I being when in fact all of my normal ways of doing aren't working anymore?
I think that's a very important question for us, and I think because of it, in the age that we live in the age since Enlightenment, in this place of when we actually do and produce, and then the Industrial Revolution that actually gets us into a place of we are really machines that could be on a productivity line and do this work. Who are we? Who are we being? And that's a huge question, because now we're in a an age where we could basically define whatever we want to do as our identity of who we are. And so that actually then produces something in us where we have to work towards whatever it is we define ourselves as, so that we can be enough, and we're never, or do enough, right? And we're never enough. And then we get lonely and anxiety ridden, depressed. It's a really hard place to be in, right? We're in this place, and we feel it, we know it. So because we're all of that, and all of this is happening within us, I think part of what we have to get back to is a core identity of who we are as humans, as human beings. So could you tell us who
Mm.
who are we as humans if we're not just producers and doers and factory workers?
Thank you for that question. It sounds like it's such a bold question, and I offer kind of a bold answer in the book, which is of course, my provisional stab at it. But so you're right to point out that there's this identification with what we do, and so the book is asking, all right, if we are not only what we do, then what? Then what are we? My hunch is that the opposite of identifying with what we do is identifying ourselves as participating in a broader process of becoming. And I call this, off on one side we're producers, on the other side we are makers, which doesn't mean that we make everything happen, but that we are people who act from our being. We have a given being that just exists, and it exists before we are doing anything. And it's so interesting because we can see it in other people. We can, that we love our friends because of who they are, not because of what they do for us. We love our pets because of their beingness. And yet somehow we get that really mixed up when it comes to ourselves. But so we know what it's like that when someone's mere existence in the world is powerful and is giving us some awareness of what is possible and makes us feel like we belong. We have all experienced what it's like to simply sit beside someone and be moved by their presence. We just forget that. And so what I try to do in the book is try to convince us that that is real, and then offer, okay, then what does it look like to act from that place instead of acting from a place of not enough? So making versus producing is the big kind of difference.
I think one of the things you said, and I want to get into this this motif that you actually put in your book of we are doers, and then we actually have to figure out how to undo our doing, and then get into this place of making, right? We're going to be makers. And I want to get into that flow of what that looks like. Can you give us the doing steps that we can do to get, no, I'm just joking. But one of the things you said about as we are making, we are creative, that all creativity is birthed out of love. I'm going to get a little theological
Yeah,
on
love it.
you, because I think that, if we're made in the image of God, and God is creative, as God's being is creative and creates us and the world and everything in it, and sets it on a trajectory. So we actually get to reflect that. That's part of our core identity. But also God is love. Like, that is his core attribute. God's core attribute is love. And so, because his core attribute is love, creative forces come out of that love and that core attribute.
Yeah.
And I have been toying around with this thing, like, love is the only thing that can solve any conflict that we have. Everything that is driven out of fear is our doing, and we're trying to solve something out of the fear that we are not enough, we can't do enough. But if we move into the space of love and the creative side, then we can actually solve these problems, these issues, and big conflicts. And I think even big, like, wars and things in the world needs a new creative imagination, an imagination that we don't have yet, and creativity. How is this love and creative forces? How do you see those two things mixing
Mhm.
for us as humans, as we are being and we are reflecting the image of God?
Absolutely. I think it's only possible to get there when we remember that we are already in relationship to the world and to each other. When we are in the lens of producing and doing, we are trying to manage, we're trying to control, which is not relational. It's objectifying. It's making the world a series of objects to optimize. It is the factory mindset. That is the opposite of assuming that you are in a dynamic, ongoing relationship with all that has been created. You are not isolated. And so to get to a place of love, I think we just have to remember how we are already not isolated. We will be moved to respond, I think, out of our being when we see how we are already connected. It becomes more obvious. It becomes less of a, oh, you're a thing over there I need to solve. It's like, no, we're in relationship. How are we in fact in relationship? So then we can see, okay, how can I be with you? Because what I do is not disconnected from what happens to you. We can easily forget it, despite how disconnected our world is. When we think about how to fix someone, it's a very different, or fix the world. It's a very different way of being than a love that acknowledges that a relationship pre-exists and we're just participating on purpose or not.
I have somebody who tells me that there are only two worldviews in this world. One is a worldview of disconnection, and two is a worldview of connection. And those are the only two worldviews. And if we move into this place of being with one another and we're all connected, if everything is connected, then love actually pervades the world. And the disconnection, fear, is the thing that pervades the world and enters into this life force. And so I think it's really important, and connectivity and how we're connected. So how do we move in that direction? How do we move from this place of a cog in a machine
Mhm.
into, like, okay, I could see it, but it is baked within me. Like, this doing mindset, and I am what I do. It feels like if I move a little bit out here, I'm taking a part of who I am. Like, I'm digging in, like, it's painful, because
Yes.
it's just
like who we all are right now, especially in the West. What does it look like to then start to peel back the layers of doing? How do we start to undo some of that for us?
Hey friends, it's Joshua here, and I just want to take a quick moment to tell you about Shifting Culture Productions. If you've got a podcast, you're thinking about starting one, or you're dreaming up another creative venture, we're here to help bring your vision to life. From production and coaching to strategy and supports, we'll work alongside you to get your project off the ground and thriving. Let's partner together to create something impactful. To schedule a call and learn more about pricing, just email me at jjohnson@allnations.us. I'd love to hear about your ideas and see how we can make them happen. Let's create something amazing together. Reach out today.
It's a great question. My first question to someone struggling with that transition would simply be to reflect on how's it working out for you, right? Like, we get some sense of control, which is really gratifying, and then we meet the limits of our control. And then we resist the limits of our control because we think we can just add more control. Um, this parenting is always a really live example of that for me, where we have our best intentions and we do everything we can, and then yet there's this other human who will only be guided by our best efforts to some degree. And then we're like, oh, okay, now I have to actually see what this person in front of me actually needs and what is actually going on instead of how I think they should be. And of course, you could in that instance of parenting or any relationship, right? Like you could pile on control upon control upon control. You absolutely could. And then see how that works. It's like that in any area of our life, whether it's how we're trying to manage our schedule. It's like you can just apply more force and more force and more rules. What usually happens is we have something that we desire and we try to control for it, and then maybe it works to some degree and then it falls apart, and then we kind of stop for a minute, and maybe we take a long time where we've given up on it, and then we try again and we force more. We kind of swing back and forth between forcing and or maybe giving up or running away or avoiding or trying to force something else. So where I would start is just looking at the reality of that dynamic and saying, how is that working for you? And are you willing to simply be open to something else? Because if we still think it's working, we're not going to stop doing it. So looking at how we're controlling and okay, what else is here? When we are in a relationship with someone, a real person, we know what that looks like. We have to actually kind of just get to know what's really going on. And it's the same with our work. It's just that we apply a lens of management to our personal lives and our work instead of a lens of relationship.
I think there's another aspect you talk about in your book, and you talk about effort. That for me, productivity feels like effort. Creating also and making, there is effort involved, and there's effort involved in all those. And so I think for a lot of us, we're like, okay, if we're not productive, if we're not in this world, like, what
Mhm.
are we going to do? Or we're just going to avoid everything and do nothing, right?
Yes.
No, you're actually making, you are being something and making something in this world with the world. What's efforts and how does that play out, especially in the two different roles of doing and making?
Totally. Yes, it makes perfect sense. Our mind goes to, oh, if I'm not producing, I'm doing nothing. Because we have this idea that working hard is associated with forcing or hustling. So the difference between deep effort and hustling is that when we're hustling or forcing, we are trying to earn our way somewhere. We're withholding a sense of our own sense of okayness, our own sense of participation until we get to the result. But as you say, effort is it's just part of any natural growth cycle, right? Like a plant to grow needs to push through soil and our muscles will atrophy if we don't use them. There is a level of struggle, but if we only know the struggle of forcing it, which is sort of punishing and a little bit like, you can only be happy when you get there. You can only be who you really are when you get there. Um, then we're going to go there automatically. But deep effort is closer to something like deep engagement. Like I'm paying close attention and I'm being with something that is maybe a little bit like a contraction, a little bit like a struggle, and I'm staying with it. I'm engaged. It's very different from pushing, from forcing. I think a labor analogy comes to mind, right? There's contractions in giving birth. Your body contracts and then it expands. You can force your way through that experience, absolutely, and that's going to color how painful it is. Or you can be with it. So like contractions will happen, and how you are with it defines how we experience those contractions. So they're not, and often we punish ourselves when things are hard. So that's another part of this. Like part of what makes something a struggle is how much we are punishing ourselves for when things aren't going our way. And if we're believing that it's just another check mark on my list, why should this be hard? This shouldn't be hard. Then we're beating ourselves up. We're like, this isn't going according to plan, and it's worse. So I feel like that is a lot of suffering and forcing it, and hustle is when we also are resisting normal challenge that comes up in real life and believing, wait a minute, this is a task like any other because my life is just a series of tasks and this should be easy, or I should be somehow somewhere where I'm not. That just adds an unnecessary sense of pain onto our process.
There's a lot of pain in the process because in this doing aspect, you never get to the place of enough. And you never get to the place of you're finished with it. It just keeps on going and keeps on going. And I think some of us, when you say in the effort of engagement and paying attention in the world, some of us, we think that's too hard because we've done so much doing and productivity that we then go into our different vices,
Mhm.
vices of we're going to numb ourselves through whatever it is, drinking, food,
Yeah.
TV, movies, just something where we could distract ourselves because we got to take a little bit of a break from the doing aspect of our lives. How do vices then point into this place of maybe our bodies are telling us, hey, this might be a creative place that we want to go. We
Yeah.
want to start to pay attention to what we're trying to numb, or how do we get to a place where we're looking and feeling and paying attention instead of just numbing ourselves to death?
Yeah, that dynamic between forcing and numbing is so real. I know that I have been there. The ways in which I numbed myself had a lot to do with the ways in which I wanted to deeply participate in the world and was too overwhelmed to do, or believed that I wasn't ready or wasn't good enough or something. And then of course I didn't know that at the time, so I would, I really loved to criticize other creative people. That was a thing I liked to do. One of my vices. I used my, brain's capacity to think, and I turned it on people who were doing what I wanted to do. And then of course I felt bad about it because no one feels good when you're being a jerk internally. But, the shape of the way I was avoiding myself also told me something about who I really was, which is someone who really wanted to engage in expressing myself and someone who had an intellect that needed a place to play. And I believe that's true about everyone, all our quote unquote vices, even if on the surface you just think, what? Why? How could that be related? No, there's something there that is telling us, oh, I actually deeply want to participate in the world. I don't want to participate in my deepest desires from a place of forcing it. So I'm running away from that, but I do really want to participate. So for example, right, like maybe you consider your vice to be watching a particular show on Netflix, like a fantasy series or something. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but let's say that's a thing you do more than you wish you were doing it. Maybe your imagination is breaking through and really wants to be seen. You have a deep capacity for in being engaged with characters and imagining things. And so if we only trusted ourselves a little more, we might be asking ourselves a different set of questions about what we really need instead of beating ourselves up.
Hey everyone, it's Joshua here. I want to take a quick moment to say thank you for being part of the Shifting Culture community. If you're enjoying the conversations we're having, it would mean the world to me if you would rate and review the podcast wherever you're listening. Your feedback not only helps others discover the show, but also keeps us inspired to bring you these impactful conversations. And if you're looking to dive even deeper, head on over to Substack at shiftingculture.substack.com, where you'll find extra insights, reflections, and more ways to engage with the topics that we explore here. Finally, if you believe in what we're doing and want to support the show, you can make a donation through the Support the Show link in the episode notes. Every contribution helps keep these important conversations alive. Thanks so much for listening and for being part of this journey to embody Jesus and impact the culture around us.
I think it's important to say, what do we need? That's one question to ask. So as we start to engage in creative works, what are some ways to posture ourselves as we enter into the creative? So we've been talking a lot about everyone. Everyone is a creative. Everyone is a creative being. This is who we are. This is our reflection of God in us, in our core being of who we are. But as we're maybe wanting to start to make some art and doing the creative work, what is a good posture for us to be connected to the world, to pay attention, and to enter into whatever it is that we feel like we want to make?
What moves you and what breaks your heart? Sometimes we're like the places where we are drawn to engage deeply in the world are places where we can see more. We can see where there's a gap and we feel it. And we're like, why isn't anyone else creating this thing? Why doesn't this exist? And it bugs us and then we get mad at other people. No, that's because you can see something so specific because of who you are. Like you're the person who can see that exists because of your particular experience, your particular shape. So even acknowledging the places in which we feel disconnected can lead us toward connection. You think, oh, like I belong in the world and I can trust that the way I see the world is called for because my heart is moved either through heartbreak or through a warm and fuzzy feeling,
Or both.
or both, usually both.
Yeah, it is usually both. What breaks your heart? What moves you? And start to pay attention to that. Something will start to emerge and saying, hey, there's something I need to say. I know that I think most creatives, as they're trying to make, and most makers are like, I know where I want to get to, and I know
Yes.
what I want it to look like. I just don't know how to get it to the quality and the place where, man, this is what I envision it going to be. It's effort to get there, right? You have to really engage in that.
Mm-hmm.
What does it look like to keep making, to keep going when we know that what we have been working on is just not there yet?
Sometimes I think that the inspiration we have that gets us moving is always meant to kind of dissolve. I don't, don't quote me on this. I don't know that that's true in all circumstances, but it feels true to me in what I have experienced with my clients and with myself is that the thing that feels like, oh, I know there's a quality and a potential here, and it's meant to almost like a star in the sky. It's like to kind of guide us, but then reality comes into play. The reality of the shape of who we are, the reality of what's available, and too often distance between what's around us and this thing becomes a huge weight. Like it becomes a big problem to solve. Oh, I have to travel this huge distance between. But I wonder if we allow that, if we hold that kind of guiding star a little more loosely, don't give up on it, but believe that it's something that can inspire us but should not become a standard we're waiting to meet, then we can participate more in what's actually happening, because the information that we need to create what we need to create is here and right now. It's in the muddy stuff of what we got and what's in front of us. So I think it's that dynamic, playing with the fact that we can only respond to what is in front of us and what we have now. And we will be moved by these big ideals and inspirations, but we cannot let it become another inherited standard that we're failing to meet. It's so like a grading rubric from school,
There's one space where I fall prey to a lot in my creative work of what I want to do and put out into the world. Some things that, come naturally and easy. And some people look and go, I just decided to put out this podcast, and this is a creative work that I wanted to share with the world of doing something. And I was able to actually then produce it, do it. I do it on my own. I do it all, like all of it.
Wow.
I'm not like collaborating with anybody on it. And it feels lonely at times, but it feels like some of this work that I really want to do, this creative work that I want to do, I'm asking others for permission for me to do it. And I think a lot of people are in that spot, in that place of like, we want somebody to give us permission to do this work. How can we just enter into the world, our everyday lives as these creative beings, and just do the work that we want to do and not just seek permission to do the work we want to do?
Oh, so real. That's so real. I think it helps to know where some of that impulse comes from. At least I suspect that a lot of that permission-seeking impulse is because we anticipate that if we don't get permission, someone will stop us along the way, and we don't want to be stopped. So it's like, okay, I'm just going to check the boxes first so I don't get so deep into it and get my heart invested, and then it gets all ruined by someone or something. That makes perfect sense. And so I think what creates permission to begin is to know that actually, no matter what comes up, like let's say, who knows, like you get a bad review or something, that no one can actually stop you. You don't actually ever have to give up. You can start now, you can start later. You never have to get it right at the beginning, because no one authorizes you, and also no one really can cancel you. I mean, they can try, but like we know, they can decide not to publish you. But no one can actually stop you. I mean, we can think of the most extreme scenarios in which someone has bound your hands and is trying, but it's this internal sense of like, if I start, I will have to stop. I think that's also why people are afraid of failing, is because they think that a failure means that they have to stop. That in fact, this career is not for them. We know that's not true.
Yeah, it's not true. But it goes, I think, all the way back to some of the beginnings of what we have in our culture of we're not doing enough. We're not enough. We want validation from other people to tell us we're enough. Keep going. There's a lot of people that feel deeply, and they feel criticisms deeply. They feel what other people think about them. They put that really high. And I think that holds people back from actually being creative forces in the world. How do we figure out that space of knowing that we are enough,
Mm-hmm.
that we just in our being as we're sitting and growing and just being human, that we're
Yeah.
loved and we're enough?
Mm.
That's a deep work that needs to happen in our soul. Are there any practices or things that we could get to so that we can do that deep work?
This is where we come back to the fundamentals of what really moves the needle in your life. Is it because someone said or did the right things, or is it because of who they were? If you can see it in another person, the same is true for you. Again, with our pets, right? They do nothing to earn it. It's the same with us. Our quality of presence, our heart, because you exist, someone says, wait a minute, that's possible? that is what moves people. That is what makes it enough. It's never because you did the right thing anyway. In fact, you've probably been in a scenario where someone has said or done things that were awkward or fumbling, but nevertheless, they were perfect. And that's the same for us. It is our heart, it is our presence that actually makes anything true, good, or meaningful anyway. So that's also the thing that we can do something about. we can connect with that, and instead of solving for every potential problem with the product, which is endless.
That's good. If we could just step into something like that, I think that would be very healthy and good for all of us. To me, it feels like being creative, whether like I'm cooking a meal or doing laundry in a creative way. Like I could be creative in whatever I do. It feels very easy to do it alone, but it's a lot harder to do it with others.
Mm,
I'm always very, very impressed when I go and I watch a movie and I see like 2,500 people in the credits of a movie. Like they all made this movie. They all created this work. You
right.
had so many people collaborating on a thing.
Yes.
What does then the creative and collaboration look like, since we are connected relational beings that we create? I think all creativity is collaboration, whether it be in the world or with each other. So
Yeah.
how do we move from the individual to the collaboration of a community creating together?
Mm. That's beautiful. I will say, and this is just my opinion, I think some people are meant to do things alone at first, or at least what looks like alone at first. I think some people are just, everyone's built differently. There are people who are kind of edge pushers and who need to kind of tinker with the vision in solitude and then bring people in. And then there are people who are very collaborative in the way they start things, right? They have a momentum with a team, and I don't think either is wrong. And then those people, their journey tends to be, then they find their own voice, their collaboration. It's just like the order, the order looks a little different. Another thing I would add to it is when it does feel lonely or maybe a little too lone wolfy, then the question would be like, how are you already collaborating? I mean, like who participated in allowing you to even conceive this thing? Whether it's a tradition you belong to, whether it's people who have gone before you, someone who believed in you. I think that can dissolve a sense of it's all on me and open up our frame. I also think that, again, trusting our own resistance when we get to a certain point and doing things alone where it's just too much, that is always a sign we're like, all right, I've taken this as far as I can by myself, and it's time to hand things off.
Yes, that is very true. I want to know, as a coach and somebody who coaches creatives and whatever they're making, what are the pitfalls that people start to fall into? What are the things that get people stuck that you as a coach can help move them around the stuck place so that they could continue
Yeah.
to further on what they're making?
I have found that usually we have learned a certain set of competencies by the time we're adults and we're trying to make things. We are great at resolving conflict between other people, and that got us to a place in our career, or we are really great managers of things. And then, and sometimes we even get to a place creatively where that has gotten us somewhere. And then we meet a wall, and that very thing that was our area of competency becomes something we have to be willing to be less good at. We need to bring in the alternative. So I would ask anyone who feels stuck with whether their sense of professionalism, their sense of being an adult, their sense of what's been their ticket to kind of belong in the adult world is now becoming their limit. And it can be really hard to let that go. And I don't think it's that we actually have to reject that part of ourselves, but if we are finding it to be constrictive, if we're finding ourselves stuck, it usually means that there's another part of ourselves that is just itching to come forward. For me, I was like a school person. I was in a family of school people. So I really relied on that part of my brain, the person who kind of could reference school things. And that became a limit in what I was creating because I felt like I had to sound smart all the time. And I wasn't connecting to my heart. It's not that I didn't have it. It's not that I wasn't like bursting at the heart. It's just that I was relying on this one muscle that I'd overdeveloped. And it was so freeing and really hard to say, okay, maybe I don't have to be the fill in the blank one. Maybe I can also be this.
How do we cultivate that aspect within children? I'm thinking
Mm.
about my son. He's 7. He loves to be correct at school. He came home the other day, it was a few weeks ago, and he said, I set a new record today at school. I was like, great. What did you set? This is great. I'm excited. I'm excited to hear it. And he goes, are you really excited? You shouldn't be excited to hear it. I was like, okay, what is it? He said, I got an answer wrong on something we did. And I was so excited for him. I said, way to go. Good job. Way to get something wrong. That means you're learning and growing. Way to get it wrong. How do we cultivate a space where it's okay to fail? It's okay to be something different, right? That you don't have to get everything right all the time. And because that holds us back into trying new things because we think that we have to be so good at something at the very beginning, especially when you're in, you have that personality. And I'm
Yes.
sure if you're a school person, you want to feel smart all the time. I'm sure you relate to that. So how do you get past that into a place of it's okay to fail, to learn, to grow so that we can have our horrible things at the beginning that we're then learning and growing as we move along?
Oh man, that's such a great example because I think in your story there's kind of a clue there. I mean, that's what we need each other for. I mean, you saw
Mm.
your son enough to celebrate. Yay, right? Sharing our failures is hugely empowering and with people who are not going to shame us for them and incorporating them into our work somehow. Again, as producers, I think we're taught to look bulletproof, but that moves no one. You might impress people, but you won't move them or yourself. You might impress yourself. We need each other so much to see the heart and see our struggle. So there's two sides of it. There's the being willing to receive, being seen in our struggle and the willingness to share. I know this is a sort of a cliche, but we learn from each other's struggles and pain anyway. When we see it in other people, do we want them to be right all the time? Absolutely not.
I think that's helpful to move us forward. And I think for all of us, like if we want to be creative people in the world, that we want to be makers and not just doers and producers in this world, that we have to cultivate the sense of it's okay that we are already enough, that we could get things wrong, that you could put out something and that's not good at the beginning. And we could put that aside and learn from that and create something different. And we could continue to move, and we need to do it with one another in relationship and community. It's beautiful. That's so good. So if you could talk to your readers of people that are going to pick up Making Time, which I hope a whole bunch of people pick it up and read it and get into it and then use it over time, that they could go into, oh, there's one chapter here that I really need right now. And you did it well. I think this is the type of book for creatives that I really really enjoy, is where, hey, you could just pick it up and you could actually go into any space in the book and then you could get something out of it. And maybe that's the thing you need for that
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
What do you hope that your readers would get from Making Time?
Yeah. Thank you so much. That they are already who they might have thought they needed to work to be. It is already there. You want to write a novel, you're already the person that writes the novel. That there is no identity you need to earn to express what is itching inside you. So if that's true, if you actually don't need to be anyone else or be different, then what is possible?
That's good. I know that you're laughing, but right now, I I paused a little bit because you inspired me and you just got me into the space, like what is possible. And I was
Mm,
like, I wanted to start to dream. And I was like, okay, I need to not dream. I need to focus back in. So thank you for
I
that.
love that.
That was beautiful.
That's
I have a
beautiful.
couple of quick questions I like to ask at the end. One is, if you could go back to your 21-year-old self, what advice would you give?
Oh gosh. Oh, poor 21-year-old Maria. It's your heart that makes something meaningful. It's not your effort or your brain. You can try less hard. I would also say have a lot more fun.
Hey, man, have a lot more fun. I like that. Anything you've been reading or watching lately you could recommend?
Ooh, yes. I'm on an Octavia Butler kick. She's a brilliant fiction author, and I'm not often a fiction person. I tend to be more of a nonfiction poetry person, but she wrote these two novels in particular in the 90s, Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents, which were set in 2024. And they're gripping, and I really recommend them. Um, they are really about navigating chaos and being a person who has a vision in a world full of chaos. So it's a profound series of books, and also just very entertaining. So that's what I would recommend.
That's awesome. I think Octavia Butler is someone and was like a little bit prophetic too. I'm sure you see, and set in 2024, I'm sure you see some parallels to what is happening in the world at the moment.
Yes, yes, eerie,
Yeah, so it's like, how did she get there? How did she
truly.
get there? I have a question for you. So I know this is everybody's favorite part, but how can people go out and get making time? Where would you like to point people to? How can people connect with you?
Oh, thank you. So, your favorite local bookstore is a great place, bookshop.org or Amazon. I'll carry the book. But if you want to connect with me, the best place is Substack. I will be there, mariabowler.substack.com. If you are interested in this conversation, then the Substack will meet your expectations, I hope, and I'd love to connect with people there.
Excellent. Well, Maria, thank you for this conversation. Thank you for entering into the space of figuring out, are we a producer or are we a maker? Are we the things that we do and the effort that it takes to actually do them, the tasks that we get to enter into in our lives? Are we just a cog in the machine of life, or are we in a reciprocal relationship with others and the rest of creation and the world, in a place where we could be makers, that we could start to be creatives and we could create, that it's just a place for every single one of us, that we are all creative beings made in the image of God, that we can be creative in our lives. So thank you for bringing us into this place of connection, into this place of creativity, into this place of making, so that we can actually be who we are and not just be people that define us by what we do. So thank you, Maria. It was
Thank
fantastic.
thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you want to see more episodes like this, go to patreon.com/shiftingculture and become a monthly patron of the show. You can help us produce more episodes so that we can see the body of Christ look more like Jesus. If you become a patron on patreon.com/shiftingculture, you will get early access to episodes. You will get episode guides. You will get bonus shows, hopefully, and more. So go to patreon.com/shiftingculture and become a monthly patron. Also, leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps us out and helps us find new listeners to the show. And just go and share this podcast with your friends, your family, your network, people that you think would enjoy it as well. Thank you again for listening to the show. I hope you have a great week.